I'm starting a new pet project where I want to sit down and interview conference goers, conference executives, as well as the vendors that attend these conferences, just to have conversations about how it went, what did they think they were seeing, and see if we can find some trends in the market. I want to start on this one. This is my first one. I was at the ConnectWise Secure event, and they were gracious enough to let PAX 8 come and speak about the changes of what real cybersecurity is. And most of that is in operations and in process and in growth of knowledge of what the responsibility is. But ultimately, it was amazing to be able to speak and not have it as a sponsorship. So they're very inclusive. And I wanted to return the favor and have a similar conversation to try to promote the things that were going well in this. And it made me realize I can probably do this at a lot of different conferences. And I can probably make this an ongoing thing. I sat down in this interview with Patrick Beggs, the new CISO, 4 months in at ConnectWise, attending this conference and asking some of the questions of how his experience has been inside the organization and how he is wanting to change some of the history and how he plans on tackling that. We'll go right into it. I will be dropping these over the course of time. And I just wanted to say thank you to ConnectWise and PAX 8 for allowing me to do what I do to help advance and rise the tide in our collective security worlds. All right. Well, we're all smiling. This is a perfect way to start this. We just had some fun. So first off, tell me and the camera who you are and kind of what your role is at ConnectWise.
All right. Patrick Beggs. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for ConnectWise.
Certainly.
Been on the job for 4 months now. So 4 months on Monday. And ironically, my second day on the job, I got thrown into the fire with the MSP Geek folks, Right Up Boom conference,
yes,
and the ConnectWise Cybersecurity Customer Advisory Council was my second day. So.
The Right Up Boom conference, to tie back to it for just a second, you would have been exposed to the first time people stepped into this non-industry, to some extent, security conference, and I bet there were a lot of questions, and I'm actually going to probably echo some of them now, 4 months post-event.
Yeah, let's
right? So one of my things that I've asked each of the executives that I've interviewed on this is, in your time being here, and it's not missed on me that these executives all exist now and haven't in a year before, right? And so I just want to highlight that point that there is a definite change at the top that's existing that I think is needed, not in a negative way, but in a if we're going to grow forward way, right? And so the first question I've asked is, in your 4 months, what's the one thing you've seen change the most, right? And what does it do for you in the future as a result?
So, what I've seen the change the most. Is I guess it's the vibe. The best way to,
this output of the culture or some degree of
the
like
culture,
the current
like it's
buzz.
Happened. I got some really great back briefs by some passionate partners, right? When I first started. Right?
Yeah, you certainly did.
Even before I started. Right?
Yeah.
So I kind of, I had a bit of an idea, not totally, of what I was walking into.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of folks just kind of watching and waiting and seeing what was going to happen. But the vibe and the momentum and the energy, I think, has been the biggest thing I've seen, right? For more of an untouchable thing. Right?
It would be tough to come in and not have some momentum starting and some buzz.
Right.
And so I think you're describing that beginning of a momentum towards things like that.
Internally, like on some of the initiatives I've already kicked off in my first 90 days, I'm being told that the change that's being things that were getting done were maybe perhaps stalled a little bit.
Sure.
They didn't have the momentum.
That they had the right ideas, they had the right heart, but it just didn't drive forward.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've been told that. That's good feedback to hear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's kind of a new air in a sense of, I bring a very aggressive kind of approach to cybersecurity. Right.
Yeah.
Vulnerability management, AppSec, and things like that. So.
Yeah. Tell me about your background, actually. So,
no
for the
problem,
people that don't know, you're the CISO of ConnectWise, but you come from much more of the corporate space, much more of that already well dealt with kind of cybersecurity posture.
Right. So I started out as a contractor of the intelligence community way back in the day. I was making a joke. I was writing snort rules and source fireboxes, right?
Nice.
Right.
Yeah.
IPS. Right?
Yeah.
Which I'd like to ask some of these guys. They probably don't even know what that is.
Yeah, I did not do IPX myself.
So the point being is then I transitioned into the DHS's National Cybersecurity Division. Yep. One of the founding members of that. Plank holder of the U.S. CERT.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
very
cool,
cool, man.
Right. So then I kind of navigated that world, and I was the first director of operations at the NKIC. So the NKIC is right.
Did you ever do anything with the fusion centers throughout that space?
So I helped create the framework
That makes sense.
Yeah, for all the
Yeah.
information
I
sharing.
might have done my research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so I had private sector. We had FSI sec folks in our
Yep.
ops center cleared, working with us.
That's awesome.
Doing incident response and all that good stuff. Bank of America plucked me out
Right.
of the government.
I'm sure the pay was significantly larger.
I was a GS-15 in the government, and it was a nice change. I'll tell you that.
For sure.
But yeah, so I did strategic threat intel group, stood up
Right.
a malware response group for them. My claim to fame and one of my more enjoyable times in my career was I built and ran their insider threat response and surveillance group.
Nice.
Their social media monitoring group as well. It's
Nice.
great.
Yeah.
Really great mission and great team. But fast forward, then I just large scale cyber operations leadership at AWS,
Okay.
at AIG, and Cognizant Technologies.
Yeah.
So global, like I said, global companies. Like
For sure.
They were, you couldn't turn those things on a dime, right?
Yeah, and in some ways there's a corollary, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I see, and I have a theory, it's probably someone else's, so, humor me, but I believe that products only rise to a certain degree of above or below the consuming entity's maturity,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's just capitalism that does that,
It's
right?
capitalism,
It's just
yes.
the way it works. You're not
is.
incentivized
Nope.
to grow beyond the consuming maturity and the lack of regulation and understanding. So I think
Right.
what's interesting in this corollary is that these large companies have been through that themselves.
Yes.
They
Yes.
built stuff before it was secure. They just threw together tech debt.
Right.
And it never got kind of revisited because there
Tech
wasn't
debt.
incentivization.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I think the corollary here is the MSPs, in my mind, are 10 to 15 years behind corporate space, right? At least in their overall playing with the football.
Sure.
I don't mean it negatively. I just mean MFA was not something that's being talked about in most enterprises today.
Good
And
point.
has been 10 years ago. We had RSA tokens.
Good
we had
example.
all of this.
That's a great example, yeah.
So
Yep.
the point is that as MSPs continue to mature and learn these things,
Mm-hmm.
you're now being held to a higher standard as a producer of code.
Right.
And so what I think is great, and the question I want to ask you is, how do you tackle tech debt in a product that has now watched a drastic growth in the maturity of the consuming entity?
So I got really handed a gift when it comes to the new general manager structure and the new folks
Agreed.
that came
I
in.
talked about that with Rafi.
So that was a gift to me in a sense of, and you understand this from your background. We're doing a scorecard approach, right, by product,
Yeah.
right? So
Brilliant.
all I'm doing
Yeah.
is aligning vulnerability
accountability.
management and accountability.
stack.
In a stack, right? And it's aligned to business units.
Yep.
And right, so you highlight that in a dashboard, you brief that out to your board, and the things start getting knocked off.
And you can assess risk in silos better.
So
right, in some way.
So we talk about that, right? So we do more of a critical app kind of categories,
Sure.
right? So we have not the world isn't equal, right? Even in
Right.
our
What
products.
could an
so-
RMM do worse than a PSA could if it was compromised? Right, it's kind of the thought
exactly.
process.
So
Yeah.
if we have to expect, if we have to spend, sweat equity on getting some things up to speed, we'd rather have
because of the size of the risk.
yeah, focus on this, get it all done, right?
Right, you have to. That's
so
the plan.
we've given them some runway, but it's we've had some situations where we've had to turn a few things off,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
But that's
fine.
what we need to be doing. Is
nothing
looking at
obviously
those, yeah.
that's critical or anything like that.
You've
right?
played this game before, though, right?
Yeah.
I'd have to imagine
So-
you played the same game at
Yeah.
Bank of America. You played the
Yeah.
same game in the federal space. You
Yeah.
played the same. Like, there has to be a similar model of walking into something that has not had the lens of that maturity
right
on it.
And it's not the saying that my lens is the right lens, but it's just it's my aperture is pretty wide,
Sure.
right?
You've had some breadth.
right,
Yeah.
and a lot of it comes from how not to do things that
Sure.
I've observed.
I've learned by hitting my head much more than I
And
have
so,
reading.
Cyber's it's a relationship. It comes down to it. People process technology. It's a heavy people business, right?
Yep.
I brought in some folks that get it as well into
Okay.
some key leadership positions, but also enabling the folks that have been there for a while and letting them know, hey, we're just clearing the path for you, man.
Yeah, we're
right.
gonna let you have what you already knew. was
Right.
needed.
We're just empowering, and we're really.
And I do find that with developers.
Yeah.
A lot of people, at least once they have the knowledge,
Yeah.
I'll take that gap aside, are waiting on the ability to put something out that's beautiful.
exactly.
Right? Like
Right.
that's
So,
in all ways.
Yeah. So even with the existing leadership team that I inherited, I said, listen, I'm going to we're enablers, man.
Yeah.
Right. Security is we got to get to a certain point.
I do love that view.
Right. But we're going to be enablers after we get them all thinking the way they need to be thought, and I want them embedded with with the AppSec developers, right?
Yeah.
And I want them understanding their world, but also I want those folks spend a little time in our world too. So
Yeah.
they kind of, that cross pollination.
And I think you and I talked about this earlier in a former conversation about that need for both sides to understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
And again, it comes back to a human element. It's it's team sport. I know it's cliche, but
yeah, no, I'm with you on it. I use a lot of cliche things.
right. But so, what we're doing that. I mean, we're really banging away at ourselves too. It's something I talked about. I've got third parties, going at us right now. Right.
Yeah.
I need to understand. I bought a Ferrari, man. So I want to see how it's running.
Yeah, let's see how it goes. Yeah.
So, but everybody does. Any CISO would do that.
And anytime you have tech debt,
Yeah.
you're going to find those things,
Right.
especially if you're gray box or at least something where you're
Yes.
sharing it.
And we're going to be doing that on a regular basis.
That's awesome.
I do a lot of, I have an ops background. Like, I do a lot of drilling, right?
Yep.
So, even so.
I've actually heard about a little bit of with your
I mean,
phishing testing, but yeah.
that. But
I love
if,
it.
say this, like I said on the keynote, if there's a, there's an IT outage, my folks have to spin up an incident response channel.
Yep.
Proving it's not a cyber event. And
Good.
so, I know it's not fun, but
Yeah.
we're,
I like that.
we're here. We're here to. I mean, when I was in the military, I wanted to go do my job I was trained to do.
Sure.
So, and doing those types of drills, even though 90% sure it's not an issue, but
Sure.
it keeps
You're building
it keeps our
defensibility. You're
skills sharp too.
You're
so.
protecting your fiduciary responsibility for your
Right,
clients and
because let me
partners.
tell you, the 10% I've seen it happen. So
Yeah, 100%.
again, experience, right?
Yeah,
I've seen it
100%.
happen, So
Yeah, and I have this term when I was running our MSP because I had 170 employees, which is nowhere near what the global structure of Bank of America and or any of the others you mentioned are.
Yeah.
But I had 170 employees and we managed 20,000 endpoints. And
it's a lot of endpoints.
I had this conversation of live compromised.
Yeah.
In the sense that I know at any given moment, with enough scale, someone's compromised at
Sure.
any time.
Right.
So I must find ways to reduce the blast radius. I must find ways, which I do like some of that siloing focus on these pieces and where they come in and how that would impact an incident response, right? And which piece is being impacted. So I love it. I'd love to check back in at Next Secure and see
That would be great,
what
man.
you've seen and learned.
I
and,
can't
and
wait for
grown
that.
From.
And hopefully we could stay in touch and really, share some ideas and collaborate.
I love
and
it.
Up for it. So.
Well, the other question I have, and this is a very personal one for me.
sure.
Have you heard of, from Jim Manico and OWASP, they have the ASVS. Are you familiar with ASVS? It's
Not
okay if you're
100%,
not. It's
100%.
not. It's kind of. It's a little tiny thing.
Okay.
ASVS is a project where they took the OWASP top 10, inversed it, and said, if we're designing an application, does it meet all these questions? And it's questions like, do you mask passwords when
Right.
you put them
Right,
in?
you vault 'em up, yeah.
How do you store your secrets?
Right.
What kind of architecture are you on?
Okay.
And even though you wouldn't share the results because of the OPSEC reasons, for example, it just says, am I level 1, 2, or 3? And it's a self-assessed function.
Yeah.
I'm starting to ask vendors to hold themselves to ASVS and just determine where are you in secure code design against the top 10 things I'm going to do to attack you.
So we actually had on the cyber call, the last cyber call we had with Angie Morgan, we've been doing all the big four
Yep,
CISOs
I saw
have been
it.
on that. Right?
I was there heckling y'all.
Yeah. So that actually we've been having some offline conversations with Jim.
Yep.
And he's
I love
shepherding.
him.
I think we're shepherding this idea to maybe get in and start getting some
Manico.
get a framework around it.
Yep.
Get us trained up on how to do it right properly.
Well, and then you can tell your vendors, hey, if you'll at least meet ASVS level 1, at least have a common line in the sand of where your tech debt is to some extent.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm all about that for sure. I'm a data guy.
Me too.
Just
brother.
show me. Just show me data.
Check a box. I
Right.
can read the data. I got you. It's wonderful, man. Listen, I just wanted to say, I know you're busy.
that's fine.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I really wanted to do this series to kind of just expose the inside of a company that cares about their market,
Absolutely.
that wants to try to solve these, because I don't believe anyone in this business doesn't.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you coming on and ConnectWise hiring the resources and doing the things they're doing to understand that if you're going to sell security, you need to be secure.
Yep.
Right.
And
that
they haven't said
matters.
no to anything that I've suggested yet. And
I
that's
wouldn't say that out loud,
been
but I love
amazing,
it.
so.
I love it. I've actually said the same thing at PAX 8, right? So I'm like, they haven't said no
just
yet. I'm
jinxed
going to
myself,
keep pushing
didn't
it.
I?
Yeah. So I'll go on the same jinx train.
But
with
I
you.
bring
Maybe it's
data.
off
But I
study.
bring data. So
You
here's
do.
what I need.
And that's it. Yeah. So listen, brother, thank you
thanks.
so much for having me here.
Thanks, brother.
Appreciate
Appreciate
you.
it, man. Yep.